Marcus Williams stepped off the tour bus at Buckingham Palace, his expensive camera hanging around his neck and his large German Shepherd Rex, pulling aggressively at the leash. The hot summer afternoon in London had already put Marcus in a foul mood. He had been traveling across Europe for 3 weeks, causing problems at every stop with his entitled attitude and his poorly trained dog. Rex was a beautiful animal, but Marcus had never bothered to properly train him. The dog was used to getting his way, just like his owner. As they approached the palace gates, Rex immediately began barking at the crowds of tourists, his powerful bark echoing off the stone walls. Other visitors moved away nervously, parents pulling their children closer. Marcus barely noticed the discomfort he was causing. He was too busy complaining loudly about the entrance fees, the crowds, and the heat. His voice carried over the excited chatter of other tourists as he criticized everything from British food to the weather. He wore an expensive designer shirt and gold watch, clearly wanting everyone to know he had money. The royal guard stood perfectly still at their posts, their red uniforms bright against the gray stone of the palace. These were highly trained soldiers, not just ceremonial figures, though most tourists didn't realize this. They had undergone years of rigorous training and were selected for their discipline, physical fitness, and mental strength. Marcus spotted one of the guards standing near the main entrance. The guard was young, probably in his early 20s, standing at perfect attention with his rifle. His black bearskin hat sat perfectly on his head, and his polished boots reflected the afternoon sun. Marcus grinned wickedly as an idea formed in his mind. He had seen videos online of tourists trying to make the guards break their composure. It had become a sort of game for some visitors, though it was strictly forbidden and highly disrespectful. Marcus decided he wanted to create his own viral moment, something that would get him attention on social media when he posted it later. Rex continued to strain against his leash, his aggressive energy building as he sensed his owner's excitement. The dog had been cooped up on buses and in hotel rooms for weeks, and his natural aggression was looking for an outlet. Marcus had always encouraged Rex's aggressive behavior, thinking it made him look tough and important. Other tourists began to notice Marcus and his dog, some taking photos and videos as Rex's barking grew louder and more menacing. A few people tried to quietly suggest that Marcus should move away from the guard, but he ignored them completely. His mind was focused on his plan to humiliate the young soldier. The guard remained motionless, his eyes fixed straight ahead. He had been trained to ignore distractions, no matter how loud or aggressive. He had dealt with difficult tourists before, but something about this situation felt different. The man approaching him had a mean look in his eyes, and the dog seemed genuinely dangerous. Marcus pulled out his phone and started recording, holding it high so he could capture everything. He wanted the perfect angle to show his followers how he had made a royal guard break his composure. He had no idea that he was about to learn a very hard lesson about respect, consequences, and the kind of justice that comes to those who think they are above the rules. Marcus moved closer to the guard, his phone camera rolling as he began his performance. He started by making loud comments about the guard's appearance, mocking his uniform and making jokes about how he looked like a toy soldier. His voice grew louder and more obnoxious as he tried to get a reaction. The guard, whose name was James Mitchell, remained perfectly still. He had been serving for 2 years and had learned to block out distractions completely. His training had prepared him for situations exactly like this. He focused on his breathing and kept his eyes fixed on the horizon, refusing to acknowledge the troublemaker in front of him. Rex became more agitated as he sensed his owner's aggressive energy. The dog began lunging toward the guard, his powerful muscles straining against the leash. Marcus had to use both hands to hold him back. But instead of calming his dog down, he seemed to enjoy the chaos Rex was creating. Other tourists were backing away quickly, recognizing the dangerous situation that was developing. Marcus decided to escalate things further. He began making personal insults about the guard's family, his intelligence, and his career choice. He moved even closer, now standing just inches from the young soldier's face. His phone captured every moment as he screamed insults and tried every trick he could think of to break the guard's composure. James felt his jaw tighten slightly, but his training held firm. He had been taught that maintaining composure was not just about personal discipline, but about respecting the monarchy and the uniform he wore. He represented something much bigger than himself, and no spoiled tourist was going to make him forget that responsibility. Several other tourists began recording the scene with their own phones, but not to support Marcus. They were capturing evidence of his disgraceful behavior. Some started calling out for him to stop, telling him he was being disrespectful and inappropriate. An elderly British man stepped forward and told Marcus he should be ashamed of himself. Marcus turned his anger on the other tourists, telling them to mind their own business. He claimed he was just having fun and that everyone needed to relax. His arrogance was on full display as he dismissed their concerns and continued his harassment of the guard. He seemed to believe that his money and status gave him the right to treat others however he wanted. Rex's barking reached a fever pitch, and the dog began snapping at the air near the guard's legs. Marcus loosened his grip on the leash slightly, allowing Rex to get even closer to the soldier. It was clear that Marcus was using his dog as a weapon, threatening the guard with the possibility of an attack. The situation was spiraling out of control, but Marcus was too caught up in his performance to realize how dangerous things had become. He was so focused on getting his viral video that he had lost all sense of judgment. The crowd around him was growing larger, but instead of supporters, he was surrounded by disgusted onlookers who were horrified by his behavior. Palace security had been monitoring the situation from the beginning, but they followed strict protocols about when to intervene. They needed to let the situation develop to a certain point before they could take action. Behind the scenes, they were already preparing their response, knowing that Marcus was about to cross a line that would change everything. The moment that would change everything happened in an instant. Marcus, frustrated that the guard hadn't broken his composure, made a decision that revealed his true character. With a cruel smile on his face, he deliberately loosened his grip on Rex's leash and gave the dog a command to attack. Rex lunged forward with all his strength, his teeth bared and aimed directly at the guard's leg. The crowd gasped in horror as the large German shepherd broke free from his owner's weak hold on the leash. For a split second, it looked like the guard was about to be seriously injured by the aggressive animal. But James Mitchell was not just a ceremonial figure in a fancy uniform. He was a trained soldier with lightning-fast reflexes and years of combat training. As Rex launched himself forward, James moved with practiced precision. In one fluid motion, he stepped aside, grabbed his rifle, and used the butt end to redirect the dog's momentum without seriously harming the animal. Rex crashed to the ground, more surprised than hurt, his attack completely neutralized by the guard's superior training and quick thinking. The crowd erupted in cheers and applause, amazed by the guard's skill and professionalism. James immediately returned to his position, his face showing no emotion, as if nothing had happened at all. Marcus stood frozen in shock, his phone still recording his own humiliation. He had expected the guard to panic, to break character, maybe even to get hurt. Instead, he had just witnessed a display of professional excellence that made his own behavior look even more pathetic. The contrast between his crude aggression and the guard's refined skill was stark and embarrassing. The other tourists were no longer just watching. They were actively condemning Marcus for what he had done. Voices rose from the crowd calling him a coward, a bully, and worse. Parents covered their children's eyes and ears, disgusted that they had to witness such behavior. Several people were now recording Marcus himself, capturing his shocked expression and obvious guilt. Rex whimpered and crawled back to his owner, confused and shaken by what had just happened. The dog had never encountered someone who could handle his aggression so easily. For the first time in his life, Rex had met someone stronger and more disciplined than himself, and it had humbled him completely. Marcus tried to regain control of the situation, claiming that it had all been an accident, that Rex had just gotten excited. But his phone recording showed exactly what had happened, including his deliberate command for the dog to attack. There was no way to deny his intentions, and everyone around him knew exactly what kind of person he really was. The palace security team had seen enough. Multiple officers began moving toward Marcus from different directions, their approach coordinated and professional. They had been trained to handle situations exactly like this, and they moved with the same precision and discipline as the guard who had just defended himself so skillfully. Marcus finally realized that he was in serious trouble. His heart began racing as he saw the security officers approaching, and he started looking around for an escape route. But he was surrounded by angry tourists and professional security personnel. There was nowhere to run, and his moment of cruel entertainment was about to become a very real nightmare. The palace security officers moved in with practiced efficiency, surrounding Marcus before he could fully process what was happening. These were not ordinary security guards, but highly trained professionals who dealt with threats to royal property and personnel every day. Their approach was calm but unmistakably authoritative. The lead officer, a tall man with graying hair and sharp eyes, stepped forward and identified himself as Chief Inspector Thompson. His voice was steady and professional as he informed Marcus that he was being detained for assault, disturbing the peace, and threatening a member of the Royal Guard. Marcus tried to protest, claiming it was all a misunderstanding, but his own video evidence had captured everything. Rex was immediately secured by animal control officers who had been called to the scene. The dog seemed relieved to be away from the chaos his owner had created, and he went quietly with the professionals who knew how to handle aggressive animals properly. It was clear that Rex's behavioral problems were the result of poor training and worse ownership. Marcus demanded to speak to the American embassy, insisting that his rights were being violated. He pulled out his wallet and started waving credit cards and cash, apparently believing that his money could buy his way out of the situation. The officers remained completely unimpressed by his displays of wealth and continued their professional procedures. The crowd of tourists watched in satisfaction as Marcus was handcuffed and read his rights. Many of them volunteered to serve as witnesses, eager to ensure that justice was served for the disgraceful behavior they had witnessed. Several people offered their phone recordings as evidence, creating an overwhelming case against the arrogant tourist. James Mitchell, the guard who had been attacked, never broke his composure throughout the entire arrest process. He continued standing at his post, eyes forward, maintaining the dignity and professionalism that had made the incident so embarrassing for Marcus in the first place. His calm demeanor made Marcus's panic and desperation look even more pathetic. News crews began arriving on the scene, drawn by reports of an incident at the palace. Marcus realized with growing horror that his attempt to create a viral video had succeeded, but not in the way he had planned. Instead of showing himself humiliating a guard, he had created evidence of his own criminal behavior that would soon be broadcast around the world. The charges against Marcus were serious and carried significant penalties under British law. Assault on a royal guard was treated as a particularly grave offense, and the video evidence made his guilt impossible to deny. His expensive lawyer would later tell him that his own phone recording was the strongest piece of evidence against him. As Marcus was led away in handcuffs, he kept looking back at the guard who had so effortlessly neutralized his dog's attack. The young soldier remained perfectly still, a symbol of the discipline and honor that Marcus had tried to mock but could never understand. The contrast between them was a powerful reminder of the difference between true strength and mere aggression. The tourists who remained began sharing their own videos on social media immediately. Within hours, Marcus's humiliation would be viewed by millions of people around the world. His attempt to embarrass a royal guard had backfired spectacularly, turning him into an international symbol of entitled tourist behavior and its consequences. Marcus spent the night in a London jail cell, a far cry from the luxury hotel he had been staying in just hours earlier. The reality of his situation began to sink in as he sat on the narrow bench, still wearing his expensive clothes that now felt like a costume from another life. His phone had been confiscated as evidence, cutting him off from the social media world where he had planned to share his triumph. The next morning brought a parade of legal consequences that Marcus had never imagined possible. His lawyer, a sharp-dressed man who charged enormous fees, explained the severity of the charges against him. Assault on a royal guard, animal endangerment, disturbing the peace, and public disorder were just the beginning. The British legal system took these offenses very seriously, especially when they involved threats to royal personnel. Meanwhile, the video of Marcus's humiliation had exploded across the internet. News outlets around the world picked up the story, and social media platforms were flooded with clips of the incident. The footage showed everything in crystal clear detail: Marcus's deliberate command to his dog, the guard's professional response, and Marcus's shocked reaction when his plan backfired completely. The public reaction was swift and merciless. People from around the globe condemned Marcus's behavior, praising the guard's skill and professionalism while expressing disgust at the tourists' entitled attitude. Hashtags began trending that mocked Marcus's failed attempt at intimidation, and memes comparing his weakness to the guard's strength spread like wildfire. Back in the United States, Marcus's employer learned about the incident through news reports. The investment firm where he worked as a senior analyst prided itself on maintaining a respectable image, and Marcus's international embarrassment was the last thing they wanted associated with their brand. His boss called an emergency meeting to discuss the situation. Marcus's friends and family began receiving calls from reporters wanting to know more about the man who had become an overnight symbol of tourist misbehavior. His ex-wife, who had divorced him 2 years earlier because of his aggressive and controlling personality, told journalists that she wasn't surprised by his actions. She described a pattern of entitled behavior and poor treatment of service workers. The hotel where Marcus had been staying quietly asked him to find other accommodations, not wanting to be associated with the scandal. His reservation at expensive restaurants around London were mysteriously cancelled, and his travel plans for the rest of his European vacation began falling apart as news of his behavior spread through social media. Rex, meanwhile, was being evaluated by animal behavioral specialists who would determine his future. The experts quickly identified that the dog's aggressive behavior was the result of encouragement and poor training rather than natural temperament. They began working with Rex to undo the damage that Marcus's irresponsible ownership had caused. The guard, James Mitchell, became an unexpected hero of the story. His calm professionalism and skillful handling of the dangerous situation earned him praise from military leaders and the public alike. The incident had showcased exactly the kind of training and character that made the Royal Guard one of the most respected military units in the world. Marcus's lawyer warned him that fighting the charges would be futile given the overwhelming video evidence. The prosecution had multiple camera angles of the incident, witness testimony from dozens of tourists, and Marcus's own recording showing his deliberate intent to have his dog attack the guard. The case against him was ironclad, and his options were extremely limited. The courtroom was packed with journalists and curious onlookers when Marcus's case finally came to trial 3 months later. He had been forced to return to London at his own expense to face the charges, watching his savings drain away on legal fees and travel costs. His expensive suit couldn't hide the stress and exhaustion that had aged him considerably since the incident. The prosecution presented their case with devastating efficiency. They played the video evidence on large screens, showing Marcus's deliberate actions in slow motion. The footage was even more damning when viewed in the formal setting of a courtroom, with Marcus's cruel smile and intentional command to attack clearly visible to everyone present. James Mitchell testified with the same composure he had shown on the day of the incident. He described his training, his duties as a royal guard, and the threat that Marcus and his dog had posed. His quiet dignity and professional manner made a powerful impression on the judge and jury, contrasting sharply with Marcus's obvious discomfort at the defendant's table. Multiple tourists who had witnessed the incident traveled to London to testify against Marcus. They described the fear and disgust they had felt watching him deliberately endanger a young soldier who was simply doing his job. Their testimony painted a picture of a man who had shown complete disregard for others and acted with shocking cruelty. Marcus's defense lawyer tried to argue that his client had simply lost control of his dog in an emotional moment, but the video evidence made this claim impossible to support. The recording clearly showed Marcus giving Rex a deliberate attack command, and his smug expression beforehand revealed his malicious intent. The animal behavior expert who had been working with Rex testified about the dog's rehabilitation. She explained that Rex had been trained to be aggressive through encouragement and poor handling, but that he was responding well to proper training. She recommended that Rex be permanently removed from Marcus's custody and placed with a responsible owner who could continue his behavioral therapy. The judge, a stern woman with decades of experience on the bench, made it clear that she viewed Marcus's actions as particularly serious. She noted that attacks on royal guards were treated as threats to the monarchy itself, and that using an animal as a weapon showed a level of cowardice that was especially disturbing. Marcus's employer had fired him during the pre-trial period, citing damage to the company's reputation and violation of their code of conduct. His professional references were destroyed, and his prospects for future employment in his field were essentially eliminated. The viral nature of his humiliation meant that any potential employer could easily find footage of his disgraceful behavior. The prosecution also revealed that this was not Marcus's first incident of aggressive behavior while traveling. They presented evidence of complaints from hotels, restaurants, and tour companies across Europe, showing a pattern of entitled and abusive conduct toward service workers. His travel insurance had been canceled, and several countries had flagged him as an undesirable visitor. As the trial progressed, Marcus began to understand the full scope of the consequences he would face. The legal penalties were just the beginning of a much larger reckoning that would affect every aspect of his life. His attempt to humiliate a young soldier had instead revealed his own character to the world, and the judgment was harsh and unforgiving. The prosecution's closing argument was simple and powerful. Marcus had deliberately used his dog as a weapon to attack a royal guard who was simply performing his duties. His actions were captured on video, witnessed by dozens of people, and represented the worst kind of tourist behavior that Britain would not tolerate from anyone, regardless of their nationality or wealth. The judge delivered her verdict with the same precision and authority that had characterized the entire trial. Marcus was found guilty on all charges: assault on a royal guard, animal endangerment, disturbing the peace, and public disorder. The judge noted that his actions had been deliberate, malicious, and showed complete disregard for both human dignity and animal welfare. Marcus received a sentence of 18 months in prison, with the possibility of early release after 12 months for good behavior. He was also fined £50,000, ordered to pay restitution to cover the costs of Rex's rehabilitation, and banned from entering the United Kingdom for 10 years after his release. The judge emphasized that tourists who threatened royal personnel would face the full force of British law. The courtroom erupted in applause when the sentence was announced. Despite the judge's call for order, James Mitchell, who had attended the sentencing, maintained his professional composure but later admitted to colleagues that he felt justice had been served. His handling of the incident had made him a symbol of dignity and professionalism, earning him commendations from his superiors. Marcus was led away in handcuffs for the second time, but this time there would be no quick release. His expensive lawyers had failed to save him from the consequences of his own actions, and he faced more than a year behind bars to think about what his cruelty had cost him. His attempts to contact journalists for interviews were ignored, as the public had no interest in hearing excuses from someone whose behavior had been so clearly documented. Rex's story had a much happier ending. The animal behavioral specialist who had worked with him during the trial period officially adopted him, giving him the stable home and proper training he had never received from Marcus. Under her care, Rex transformed from an aggressive, poorly trained animal into a well-behaved companion. His rehabilitation became a symbol of how proper care could overcome the damage done by irresponsible ownership. The viral video of Marcus's humiliation continued to circulate online long after his trial ended, serving as a permanent reminder of the consequences of entitled behavior. Business schools began using the incident as a case study in how personal conduct could destroy professional reputation, while tourism organizations used it to educate travelers about respectful behavior abroad. James Mitchell received a promotion and was selected for advanced training with an elite military unit. His calm handling of a dangerous situation had demonstrated exactly the qualities that military leaders valued most: courage under pressure, professional discipline, and the ability to neutralize threats without escalating violence. His career flourished while Marcus's collapsed completely. Marcus served 13 months of his sentence before being released on good behavior, but his punishment continued long after leaving prison. His criminal record made employment almost impossible, and his savings had been depleted by legal fees and fines. He was forced to move back in with his elderly parents, a humbling experience for someone who had once flaunted his wealth and status. The incident became a cautionary tale that was shared around the world, reminding people that actions have consequences regardless of wealth or nationality. Marcus had sought to create a moment of viral entertainment at someone else's expense, but instead had created a permanent record of his own moral failure. His few minutes of cruelty had cost him his career, his reputation, his freedom, and his future. The story served as a powerful reminder that true strength comes from discipline, training, and respect for others, not from bullying or aggression. James Mitchell's professional response to an unprovoked attack had shown the world what real courage looked like, while Marcus's cowardly behavior had revealed the emptiness behind entitled arrogance. In the end, karma had indeed hit back fast, delivering justice that was both swift and complete.